Bueno, buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks a lot for being here. I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Alejandro García Gasco, and I belong to Mafre Global Risks and Engineering Division. I'm in charge of building and energy. We finished our last presentation. We are going to close this day. This is the last round table, and I'm sure that we are going to raise the bar of already wonderful presentations. We had a round table with 3 people, but something must have happened with 2 people, but Alberto Toledano couldn't make it here, unfortunately, but we're going to have a wonderful round table and a spectacular round table because we have with us Carmen de Olufeu. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you to her, and I'm going to read you an excerpt from her biography, her career. You will know that we have a wonderful engineer. He's infrastructure engineer. She studied in the University of Catalonia, and she has broad experience in building, managing, and operating large infrastructures and equipments, public equipments, under different types of financing. She's specialized in public-private partnerships. She did a postgraduate in international tenders in the University of Ramon Llull. She was the director of innovation studies of the subway of Barcelona, and she was the general director of HISO, the company that manages the infrastructures of the Catalonian government. And she did so in the period where there were more investments in the country, in Catalonia. And that's when the subway was expanded, the City of Justice in Barcelona was built, judicial and hospital buildings were built in Barcelona. And I want to highlight too that while she was doing this, in parallel with all those managing all of this, she has held different positions, among which positions in the board of directors of the Spanish Organization of Underground Tunnels and of the Geological Institute of Catalonia. She is part of the engineering board of organization and the infrastructure engineers board or professional organization, and she's the president of the alumni organization of her engineering school. She's also a teacher. She is an associate teacher of transportation engineer in the University of Ramon Llull, and she teaches in different postgraduate and masters. More specifically, she teaches courses on project management, public works, etc. She's right now the general director of the Line 2 of the subway in Lima, working for the company Iridium, the company that is managing the tenders of the group ACS. We're going to hear Carmen, and then we will open up the floor for questions. We're going to have a Q&A session. We have Carmen here, so I want to invite you to pose as many questions as you feel like. Good morning. I want to start by thanking Mafre Global Risks for inviting me to this symposium. It's been really interesting and it's very well organized. So without any further ado, I'm going to start talking to you about infrastructure that is really, really emblematic and it's very necessary in Peru and for the city of Lima. I'm talking about the Line 2 of the Lima subway. I want to start saying that in 2050 in the world there will be over 9,500 million people, and these people will live in cities. 75% of these people will live in cities. Daily mobility is a phenomenon that is growing and it's very complex. It's something that is part of our daily life, and cities in general don't have a concept of limits. Cities expand like gas. Here we have images of different cities. We have skyscrapers and more low-rise cities. So cities grow and grow and grow. And this has happened in Peru. People from the mountains moved to Lima, and Lima has grown in a very short period very much. So this urban sprawl, if they're not organized, can cause problems, because although cities are our best inventions, are also the worst catastrophe. Why am I saying this? Because cities, as we know, create waste, pollution. We need to figure out mobility. So there are a series of demands, of challenges that we need to respond to. And if we don't do this in time, we see problems like the ones we're seeing in some cities and countries where mobility is chaotic. As Larry Beasley says, he's an international consultant on urbanism or land planning. We need to try to build cities where people want to live in, cities where people feel comfortable in. This is a picture of Lima. There are tons of cars, and we can see how poorly planned mobility is. And the problem is that public space is a limited good. We have tramways, buses, bikes, and they're all struggling for space. So there's always this tension in space if a good solution is not found. So what we need to do is to plan, having an integral vision so that we can have a sustainable urban model where from an urban planning and from a transportation point of view, things are coordinated. We cannot have land planning we may have land planning that may seem correct without thinking of transportation. So land planning as a physical structure has some demands, and if you offer transportation for a territory that's not planned, eventually there will be human settlements because the service is there. So those two disciplines need to go hand in hand and be connected to services, of course. When we talk about transportation, when we talk about mechanical transportation, more specifically private cars account for 35% of all CO2 emissions, and greenhouse effect, which is one of the main causes of climate change and one of the main users of non-renewable energies. So the environment and mobility are two very important concerns. So multilateral entities or bodies have these as a priority. Accessibility. As you know, accessibility as the problem or the response to different barriers, physical or economical and social mobility, is conditioned or it depends on a series of space, time, conditions. When you see that investments in transportation are going to improve accessibility, and once accessibility improves, we realize that everywhere in the world, all cities, that lots and buildings increase their value. So when there's accessibility, the price of lots increases. So investing in transportation favors some people and not other. That's why demand research is very necessary. The demand needs to be established in order to see where to invest. An investment in transportation will favor a specific area that will be served, and that area that is served through transportation, in that area, the assets will gain value. So correct planning is necessary. So we need a planning of urban mobility, territorial and urban planning, and planning of services and infrastructures and transportation. So all of these three aspects need to go hand in hand. I'm going to talk very briefly about a few examples before talking about Lima. For example, London. Since the end of the 19th century, London already had a subway system. This is the London Tube network. It's a very important network, not only in terms of number of kilometers served, but also in terms of how it is planned. This is due because of its long history and good planning. This accounts for cities that are perfectly habitable. Subways have all the advantages and no inconveniences. What are the inconveniences? Well, we will talk about that later. London has close to 10 million people, like Lima. Lima has 10.5 million inhabitants, but the difference between the two cities is very different. London solved this issue a long time ago. So the case of Paris is very similar to the case of London. In the 19th century, it already established its subway system. It has over 12 million inhabitants. Here we have the plan. Here we have some images of the modernist subway stops that date back from the beginning of the 20th century. And in red, we can see a perimeter line that surrounds Paris. Something that I haven't mentioned is that the networks in cities that have had a subway system for over 1 century used to have access, because you had the feeling that you had to go to the center of the city to do anything. But over time, we realized that this is not the case, because having to go to the center, to go somewhere, it's not always the most convenient way, because sometimes that makes the trip longer. So a ring is being designed in Paris. So they are it already has a peripheral train, on surface train, but right now an underground ring is going to be added. Here we have a more modern subway, the Seoul subway. Together with Shanghai, Seoul is the largest networks in the world. It has almost 1,000 kilometers, and they were inaugurated in 1974. But these countries like China, Korea, when they start doing something, they do it big time, and they surpass everyone. Here we can see this hive of networks. It's not that access-based. The advantage of starting late is that you can learn from the mistakes from your predecessors. This is the subway of Moscow. It was very access-based, but then it created this ring. So the initial network was based on access or radius, and then it created the ring. And the aesthetics of the metro are just amazing. Here we have the metro of Shanghai. They really know how to manage it, because when there are swarms of people, they place provisional fences, and people walk like a sheep in a pen. And it is very well organized. Here we have the Madrid subway. It's one of the largest networks after the two that I mentioned. It has over 400 kilometers, and it's a metro that is approximately 1 century old. Tokyo, we can see that the city is very densely populated, and we can see that in the subway lines. Here we have the New York subway. It's pretty old too. And then we also have other transportation systems, because it's not only about a heavy subway. We have other types of transportation that couldn't work for short distances. Subways have stops that are usually not longer than 1 kilometer long. Stops, they stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. So for longer distances, this type of solutions wouldn't make sense. We have high-speed trains. High speed is great for large distances. Whenever I show this image, I try to explain how people think of high speed. It looks like it's Superman, but it's not Superman, it's a high-speed train. Here we have the subway in Santiago de Chile. It's more limited, but Santiago has had a subway for many years. It recently inaugurated lines 3 and 6 that are already automatic. Here we have the Washington subway. I visited the city for different reasons. Its aesthetic is really beautiful. It's very similar to the Central Railway Station. It's very limited because the city is not that large, but the network is adequate. The Barcelona subway network will turn 100 years old very soon. Initially, it was shaped as a radius. It was shaped as an axis. Here we have Montjuic, the mountains, and line 9 is a very special line because it kind of like that's the perimeter. Initially, it was closed here on the coast, but since there were enough networks, that final part was not built, and it sort of like follows the side. It kind of like goes in parallel with the road, and it has another line. It's like a Y. On both ends, it is Y-shaped. This is the aesthetic of the subway in Barcelona. I'm a Barcelonan native, and we're very demanding when it comes to design. We have the subway of Stockholm. It was excavated, and it's like a cave. So what they did was kind of like painting on the rock, and this is the aesthetics that they achieved. The recently inaugurated subway in Quito, it's just being built. I think they're building it really fast. It's a city that has old area. This is the square of San Francisco. The old area needs to be excavated very carefully. Tunneling machines, tunnel boring machines are used. And we have to be really careful with the old part. Then we have tramways. Transportation is to respond to specific demands or issues, and we can't find solutions that are too big for what we have, like having heavy meters in a 500,000 people, because that would be wasting public funds. Amsterdam has many tramways. So they're serving or they're responding to the demand. But it doesn't mean that that's the only means of transportation. Probably a large city couldn't be served just with tramways. When we talk about BRTs are just off-the-road lanes for buses. Here we have two examples. We have Bangkok's BRT and Bogota BRT. I went to Bogota to give a presentation. Well, Bogota has over 10 million inhabitants, probably it's close to 11, and it's not possible to solve Bogota's mobility with a Transmillennium, with a BRT, because we have lines, they're passing each other. It's very successful, but it's not responding to the demands. I don't know if there's anyone from Colombia here, but they have been in Bogota. They've been trying to go. They've been going back and forth on what the solution can be for Bogota. but the BRTs together with subways and other different means of transportation will end up solving Bogota's transportation issues. Here we have another BRT, Quito's Ecovía, or Quito's ecological lane. So let's talk about Lima. Lima had one of the first tramways. So it's very interesting that in 1878 it already had a tramway, and it had 40 kilometers of tramway, a tramway that went all the way to Chorrillos. Chorrillos was a place where there were waterfalls near the coast. So this is what's happening in Lima right now. Micros, this type of transportation is called micro. You ride the bus and your body's hanging out of the, and people hail and say, hey, stop, and they compete with each other. It's pretty chaotic, very untight, very not ordered. It's not an orderly transportation system. So Lima really needs a subway network. We already have an out of road lane. So BRT is it's an out of the road lane, and it's solving some of the problems. And Lima already had buses of the so-called blue lane buses. And then some years ago, Line 1 was inaugurated. This is Line 1. Here we have a close image of a station, and here we have the path of Line 1. These are the stations. The stations are like corrugated iron roofing, and since in Lima it doesn't rain that much, this roofing is open. So when the Line 1 was designed as an over-the-road, an elevated line was designed, it creates an architectural barrier in the city. That's what happens to elevated subways. Tramways are different. Tramways are smaller in terms of the cars, and it has 2 or 3 coaches or cars, because tramways serve a smaller demand. But when we talk about subways, having an elevated subway like this, I don't know if someone from their house would want to see every 1 minute or 1.5 minutes how that line is stopped and goes, and it's over ballast. Ballast is not used anymore in our days because with the load cycles of the train, ballast starts decomposing, and in order to recover that it needs to be replaced, and it creates dust in the air, etc. So I think that these legacy systems should not be left in the city, especially in a city like Lima that aspires to being one of the world's top cities. This happened in many countries that inaugurated these elevated systems. So politicians, in order to get votes, since there's social pressure because people don't want to see these big infrastructures from their houses, so the public creates demand, and those infrastructures that cost lots of public money and that are properly executed need to be demolished. Okay, so here we have Lima. Lima is the capital of Peru. It's on the Pacific Ocean, the coast of the Pacific, and there's been an increase in the accident rate. We have seen different images of how chaotic mobility is. And here we have some figures of traffic jams. So it is really in desperate need for mobility, for a mobility change. This is the current network. We have Line 1, the one that we saw. It's an elevated viaduct network. Is this green line, and the one the line that was awarded to the company that I'm working for, it's line 4 and line 2. Line 4 will run parallel to line 2. Here we have the mountains here, and here we have line 1 that runs from north to south, and line 2 runs from east to west. And then line 3 has been planned, line 4, line 5, and line 6. If we zoom in line 2, here we have the north, so it runs east to west. It runs from Ate to the port of Callao in the coast, and it runs through very centric and emblematic places like 28 de Julio, Plaza Bolognesi, which is an area that has lots of examples of heritage. We have this Plaza Central, where the Museum of Lima is, and then we have another station that is Carmen de la Lengua, and from there will be an additional parallel line that will make it all the way to Gambetta. This line is destined to serve the airport, and it's not known yet whether there will be an additional shuttle or how it will be connected to the airport, but that additional line will be connected to the airport. So there was a tender, and the tender was awarded to a consortium that has broad experience on a world level. It's led by the ACS group. Iridium is the brand that is in charge of the tenders of ACS. I work for Iridium, and Dragados is ACS's brand when they're building. Those are the leaders of the consortium. Iridium has been the first company in receive awards for 13 years on a row. Then there are other companies, FCC, COSAPI, Ansaldo Breda, etc. These are Ansaldo Impreglio. They're in charge of the different aspects. Ansaldo STS is Hitachi Rail, is leading the strictly railway infrastructures, and Ansaldo Breda is in charge of all the rolling stock. Actually, the trains are built in Reggio Calabria in Italy, and they come by boat through Panama to Lima. This consortium has over 36,000 kilometers 3,600 kilometers, many of which have been made with tunnel boring machines. This consortium is an expert in this field. The first largest tunnel boring machines in the world were used here in line 9. Line 9 is the largest line 9 in the Barcelona city. Was very innovative. The soil in Barcelona is very complicated because it's very complicated. It's between there's lots of underground water, there's the mountains, and the largest tunnel bearings were built there. So Iridium in 2001 and 2002 finished many subways, and the last one was built in Seattle.
As I was saying, if we're talking about subway, all these kilometers, subway has close by stops for urban subways, so there are hundreds of stations. In cities such as Santiago de Chile, we already have how seismic it is, which exactly happens to Peru, Lima, or San Francisco, in that, as they call it, the fire belts, or Thessalonica, Naples. When the earthquake comes, it can be very damaging. But we also have New York, London, Milan, Madrid, Riyadh, Barcelona, Panama, Doha, etc., among many others. As we were saying, the subway was not public works. This is not a budget works, but as an APP, public-private joint venture. This was licensed with co-finance. We have specific rights on surface, but there's a co-finance. This type of modality, APP in Spanish, what they're trying to look for is the best expertise, not only from the public, but also from the private world, because they both count with it, and try to create synergies in order to obtain the aim, to design and exploit something that they have built. And the risk transference, which is fundamental, especially in this project, is for private, except the risk for demand, which is a study that the licensee is an input, and we do not count with the risk of delivering the terrain free from taxes or free from any interference. That is something that the licensee has to pay for. We cover the risk of design, building, operation and maintenance, and we are going to measure and penalize if we do not fulfill what we were told we were going to deliver. Investments is of 4,531 millions without tax. 35 years, 5 of them are for building and 30 for operation and maintenance. I shall explain this later on some slides. For different reasons there has been a delay, and now we have exceeded the 5 years time for the building process. Then the license will never be the transfer of the property, that will always be of public domain. The initial installment we have not been able to fulfill them. If the concessionaire were here, he would say otherwise. But the person who provided us maybe were not ready to tackle this type of infrastructure and did not have the know-how or did not calculate properly how long it would take to deliver those terrains free from taxes, free from loads. Because we are not talking about places that are falling into a category of eviction. Some of them were experiencing problems with sewage. We have optic fiber, different areas where water pipelines are crossing. So this is not something that you can obviously manage overnight. And when you have to hand in the terrains, obviously the terrains were not clean from all these different types of services or interferences. So that's why there's been a great impact in the critical route. It could have an impact in other different activities that were not part and parcel of this critic period. But anyhow, as of today, we have committed ourselves that the 13th of December last year, there's been an addendum that is zero. There is going to be no increase in the price. In this case, one license is a price that it has been set or fixed. It's a key that they give you in hand. If they don't ask you to provide extra works, your risk for building is just your own. If a terrain is better or worse, it's great. And if it's worse, then you will have to put up with it. You will have to invest more money. But you cannot claim the person who gave you that to pay you for more money. That's how in the private sector we are very much aware of this. The license may be reluctant or they are not monitoring us. They consider us as public works when actually we're private. That is not part and parcel of our contract. That's not the way we manage things. So, as we said, 13th December 2018, we agree on the new operational terms and the new installments for the delivery of the terrain on the part of the concessionaire. What are the installments? This is line 2 and the branch. It was divided into 3 different areas. The red one, which is the prioritized, out of the 35 kilometers with 35 extensions and 36 pits for emergency exits and ventilation, and the part there where is the axis for line 4, branch 4. Out of the whole set, this part has 5 kilometers long, 5 stations, 6 pits. Then we have other parts, external parts, that go to one side of the line and go into Plaza Bolognese, which is in the center of the city. And then phase 2 goes to El Callao, line 2, and the whole branch. So the dates are, for the prioritized part, February of 2021. This date is for GUA2. This is a line, heavy train, that means great demand, subway, and totally automatized in GOA 4. GOA are the automatism level. GOA 2 is the one we're used to see, for example, in Spain, in Madrid. GOA 3 is an intermediate, and GOA 4 is the highest level of automation that we can find today. And the subway of Lima is going to be this last generation project. And 3 months later, from that date, it will operate in GOA 4. So from the very beginning, this was something promised, but from my point of view, it's a mistake, because for automatization, first you need to make some tests. The problem is that in GOA 4, there's going to be no driver. July 2023, and final part is September 2024, always in GOA 2. This is going to have with a fleet of trains that are initially 42. They are manufactured in Reggio Calabria, Ansaldo Breda, now Hitachi Italy, distributed with 5 trains for that first parts. They're going to be circulating. We also have reservoir 5 for the next phase. 15 plus 5 is 20. Other 15 for the second phase of line 2, and 7 that will go through the branch. So 42 in total. But this is not the total amount of trains we're going to count with, because the demand is not the same at the beginning than the one at the end. So these 42 trains may turn into 72. And that's why infrastructures are going accordingly. They have 6 coaches, and maybe they're going to have a 7th one if it is necessary. I had already told you that this is the first heavy subway, totally automatized from Peru, with these 3 features. Very few in the world are like this. We have a lot of heavy subways, but they're GOA 2, not GOA 4. There is a lot of light subway. There's GOA 4, but it's not subterranean and it's light. So really having these 3 features is going to be like one example. Our initial demand is 660,000 travelers a day, but actually the horizon demand is 1 million, more than 1 million. For example, in Barcelona, we have 11 lines, 100 years, and among all these lines, it carries 1 million passengers a day, around 365 million a year. That means to say that Lima is very much in delay as for metro. They should have had a subway for a long time ago. Now there is only 1 line, and 1 branch has a forecast of 1,200,000 people is not something logical. It crosses different districts, but it provides service to a railway influence area of 13 districts, which is 2.5 million out of the 10 million that live in Lima. The maximum speed is 90 kilometers an hour, but the commercial and trade speed, because they are nearby, station, tunnel, pit, and go on, so on and so forth. Gravity centers, and the same for pits. There is about 1 kilometer of distance. So the commercial speed obviously is lower. 36 kilometers is too high from my point of view, because this is very close. It should be 34.5 or 35. But that's what we have agreed upon. And the frequency is going to start growing from 6 to 1.5 minutes. Many people have asked in Lima, why should it be automatic? Because they immediately think it's more expensive. I'm private sector, but whoever presented that option, think it very carefully, because for this demand you need a frequency of 1.5 minutes. And if you go for these frequencies and you don't have a go for, the chances for human failure is very high. I've been for 20 years in the metro of Barcelona 2 different times, and when you have to be on watch, on your weekly watch, and there is any incident, no need for accidents or casualties, but that is recorded in the black boxes. All this is re-listened, who requested permission to enter or to exit, power shortages, and you see 99% of times there's normally human failures. So with these frequencies of 1.5 minutes, we would be in problems if we do not have a go forward. This runs with electricity, which is clean energy, and it then supports sustainable mobility. Going from one side to the other of the line has been done normally in 2 hours, and now it's going to be done in 45 minutes, and the branch is only going to have trajectory of the 10 minutes. We believe that this line is going to improve the environmental quality. There is no greenhouse gases in the equation. There is no other type of pollution, such as visual or acoustic pollution. If we want to recover the surroundings, and there are policies for doing that, we can make it more friendly environment for everyone, for all the inhabitants of Lima. Universal accessibility is a key factor. There is always something adapted. Maybe not necessarily a person in a wheelchair. Anybody can be a handicapped person because we broke an ankle, or because we are carrying a pram, or packages, or suitcases. Also, for people with visual impairments, they're gonna use different types of cues so that they can walk, and that's gonna be an improvement in quality of life. This is a picture of Barcelona. This is the axis of Paseo de Gracia, one of the most expensive axes in the world. Barcelona is dying of success. It's out of the first countries, cities of tourism, thanks in part to Ildefonso Cerdá, who left us this orthogonal way of planning, and also because we are the cradle of modernism and sculpture and design, etc. This is the axis of Bayó, La Pedrera. This would have never been what it is now, hadn't it been living for 100 years, 2 subway lines, the big one as it was called, and line 4. This is subway, you have it, you can enjoy of it, you use it, you don't even see it, you cannot hear it, and there is no negative repercussion. That is what makes a difference. And I forgot to say that this infrastructure, at this point in time, is the biggest project in Peru. And it contributes to 0.5% of GDP. Actually, it's a 0.8. But this is the value that was set in the agreement. There are many possibilities for employment, not only for the building, but also in the maintenance and operational aspects. Now we are about 2,000 people that are being hired, but at its peak, we will be hiring 5,000 people, but indirectly maybe 25,000, 35,000, because of course this is an industry engine. Something that we have witnessed, as I hinted before, is that where there is a subway, predios, the terrains, as they say in Peruvian, the flats, the buildings, departments, in that area, close by, not necessarily near. They are very much, they can increase their prices, and markets and can also increase their values. And that's something I always recommend to my students when I talk about this. It provides you with safety and quality and modernity look. Another things we had to take into account was financing. We had the time to close the financial aspect, respecting everything, and we had $2 billion. We issued bonds in New York and London, and 800 from credits. The audience counts with the financing of multilateral companies. They are very strict, as they should be, and they are watching us. They are watching over us, whether the public or the private part. Precisely because it was the biggest operation not only in Peru, but also in the whole South America, and also one of the greatest in the world. We were credited with the 3 standards of quality of greatest importance, as you can see on the slide. Something that is less general topic, but more technical, but so that you can understand what are the elements that are part and parcel of this infrastructure are 4: stations, pits, tunnels, patios, workshops, and railway system, and the rolling stock. Stations are these rectangles that measure 125, 130 meters long. To make possible that the day you want to inject a 7th coach, you can do that. You can count with the infrastructure already built. Because something that I had experienced in the subway in Barcelona, I had to make longer some stations that were 90 years old. Because it's something very hard to do. If you want to do that in silence, it's impossible and it's very risky. So it's good that infrastructure are planned in the long term, so that in the coming 50, 60, 100 years, you don't have to make any an amendment. We've thought about that, and the person that charges to do this already thought about that. It was not our doing. It varies 27, 30 meters of difference. Here we would have the tunnel, the exit, the station. We have a series of boxes that are buried. With those elements that are the only ones we shall see on the surface of the city, which are access, staircases, lifts, emergency exits, something that's totally level with the surface and is inserted in the city. All types of materials, cables. The arms may be longer or shorter, but in essence, this type station would look like you can see on the slide. So what we're going to see on the surface, an elevator, lift, because we must have stair, normal stair, ventilation, etc. If we had another type of cut, this is the axis of the tunnel. All stations, the 35, would be built with cut and cover, or Milan method. This system consists, before I explain what is this method about, let me say that generally speaking, trucks go under roads, under streets, because it's less risky. That's the easier thing to do, not in economically speaking, but you don't have to expropriate buildings and only goes through the corner of one building, and maybe there is a curve or counter curve. And normally this is how it is done. So what you perform here is to drill 2.5 meters. This is the part that you can see in brown, and then you build these walls that are like screen walls. Screeners have had to come from Europe. They've only been used in Brazil, and Chile has a terrain that's very similar to Peru, so you don't use screeners. So these screeners are machines that have a 2-valve spoon, which is kind of a shell, and has some teeth that is scratching the surface and then sticking back to the lorry. So in order to build these walls that are going to remain there forever in contact with the terrain, these screens are carried out in sets. So this will depend on how much this spoon is going to open up. These are quite big, so normally there are 4 meters of diameter. So then you build some pilots that are distance of 12 meters, and when all these elements are presented, you have terrain over there, then you make the part, the upper part. This is going to be the vestibule. Is the area where we're going to carry the chief of station is going to be there. Tickets are going to be sold there, whether machines, with people selling them. We have commercial facilities. Once you have done that, you drill up to the bottom. This is a render. Then you build both parts and the tracks. This is lateral, but this is a mistake, but this is what we agreed upon. But subway lines should have the terminals with the central part. Platform, sorry. So now we don't have any case of central platforms. All of them are sideway platforms. But of course, we're not free to do everything we wanted to do. This is a summary of what we're doing. Here you can see this is the main road of Lima with a lot of traffic because all products coming from Sierra are going into the city. Here we are seeing the cover, the main cover. We are emptying concrete. Once you drill, what you find are the screens and the pilots that are already covered, because it's there in the station. It's a way to embellish in the architectural point of view. Then you go to the bottom, and then you cover it as you need it. We have a hollow so that you can see the light to take out, to extract the land. Maybe then later on we can put there some staircases or something. This is a current picture. So we have a hole for stairs, platforms are already done, some rooms. This is the first part in red that I showed you in a previous slide. And February of 2021. Pits, 2 different types of pits. Some are lateral, some are not. Basically, in this area, this is associated with a type of construction. There are 16.5 meters of diameter. The whole line is sub-line, but it's quite superficial because it's about 20 to 25 meters. So we cannot be talking in comparison with line 9. That was hell in comparison with this. This is paradise. This is like very superficial. So these pits are done through rings, top to bottom. Is a new Austrian method. Is we advance, and ring, top to bottom, till we get to the bottom. Then we put the iron, And this is architecture. We're not only looking for pressure and be prepared for emergency exits after the steel framework is put on. So what we want to do is to evacuate people for the familiar place where they start using the service or they leave the service. And in order to fulfill with what we are supposed to do, they can also live through the pits. They have this double function. From these wells, from these pits, we also build tunnels to one side or the other, but only those from one part. New Austrian method. So as I said before, we mark the first section of the mouth, then we have a pilot of 12 meters long. Is a very resistant material, but it stays like, we could compare it to cheese. But it is good to protect it with kind of umbrella. This is the new Austrian method. In the phase 1A and one part of 1B, trains are in the same level. For if we're building and if there is any problem, it's not the same to be in a tube one way than having the chance or having experience a problem in one side but not in the other. But of course, we have to make a cost-benefit study. And we also have the neighboring parts. Out of the 35 kilometers of landway is dry land, and the rest 25 is done with the use of tunneling machines. So very quickly, what is this system about? The terrain is vertical. The section could have been done completely, but those supervising said this is not good, so advance and clash. When you are drilling, 125 to 2 meters of distance, first of all you put with the use of these materials, you create projected concrete with metal fibers with a layer of 5 centimeters. Then we put that structure that you can see there, that as we know from mining and from tunnels in general, they can be mega or other types of profiles. Other one that you can see in black is in the shape of lattice. It has a layer of around 20 centimeters. That ends up being the primary sustainment of the structure. This is how it looks. You can see those ribs, which are the lattice, with the lattice work, and concrete is there. So as I said before, once we have advanced, then we break, we drill a little more, and then we made it concrete. Then we make it, we protect it from water. Then we have the steel work, and then comes the car that empties the concrete out, takes the concrete out. So that's how the tunnel is going to look like.
We have already completed around 7 kilometers. These are the transitions. It's really easy to access and very clean. Here we have the tunnel with TBM. TBM has 10.24 meters exterior, and we have the trains at the same level. On the sides, I'm not going to explain on this, but we have the evacuation passerelles to meet with the NFPA, all the cables, etc. We have the catenary here, or the overhead line, and these are the tunnel boring machines. We designed them, and with the support of the manufacturer, who was Hernec. Hernec was totally reliable. They're the leaders of the market with 70%, and they may seem the same as the others, but they're not. This one is for dry land, and that one is ready for underground water. The one for dry land, it has 170 meters long, and the other one is 150 meters long. Here we have the tunnel bearing machines. The first one for dry land is going to access. We did this with an ATM, and we are heading Callao. So here we have a dry land tunnel boring machine, and for Peruvians this is San Juan de Dios, and it gets out in Insurgentes. The tunnel boring machine for a water terrain accesses through Gambetta and exits after Carmen de la Lengua, and it accesses through Insurgentes and it exits in Callao. That would complete the 35 kilometers of tunnels. The tunnel boring machines are like an industry that walks. It's an industry that can only walk forward. They can't go back. That's what tunnel boring machines do. They either go forward or they stop. If you have any problem, like what happened in the Eurostar train, they need 4 pre-made elements that are built in a keystone plant. In this case, we have 6 keystone, or the key, the final, the closing keystone. They're not the same. They're not all the same, because if it were a tunnel that it only goes in a straight line, they could be the same. But since you have curves and perfect turnings, you need, they end up being different. So each puzzle has a number, and they are inserted in rings within the tunnel boring machine, and they are placed where they need to be placed. They can't just be placed anywhere. Here we have how tunnel boring machine works. This is a render. Here we have the front with the cutting structures, the discs. The land is in a beige color. Here we have the endless screw, and this is the same mechanism that's used in mining. If you are close to the exploitation well, you can use the belt, and if you're closer to the end, you can have other options. It's contained in a container. It's placed in a container in an additional path that will serve to evacuate the soil where the trucks are waiting. And we use and that's the conduct used for inputting water and different inputs. Many people are working in tunnel boring machines. He has a dashboard with different inputs, and those inputs need to be compared with the monitoring and the control that we do on the sites to see how the terrain is moving and how buildings are reacting, because that's very important when you are estimating. Well, software can be complicated. When you enter data, you get results, but you have to see whether at the end of the day those results of the software really make sense and are in line with what you're seeing on the surface. And what buildings are doing. Here we have an arm that's called the Erection arm of the tunnel boring machine. It gets the keystone through suction. It places the bolts, and it locates the keystone where it needs to be placed. How does it advance? Well, there's a jack here that is supported on the previous ring, and that's what makes the machine the possibility of progressing while the discs eat away the soil, and that soil falls in the chamber. So the last keystone, the closed keystone, is placed. It has a rubber band, and that's how we have the ring ready and how we progress. Another important element are the
Los patios talleres son extensiones de 20 hectáreas aproximadamente en este caso y
these workshop patios here. Here we have the trains that the trains will make it to the workshop here. This is an auxiliary building, this is an office building where the company will be. This is, we get high current at 60,000 from the company. In that company in Peru is an awarded company. From there we take it to the SEAT and where it's converted to 20,000, and from there it goes to a substation where it goes from those 20,000. I'm talking about alternate current, so we go to 1,500 to continuous that feeds the overhead line, and then it goes to 220, 30 or whatever. In this area here, that's where we have the tunnel boring machines that we haven't been able to introduce yet. This is where we have the courtyard. So that's where we do the maintenance work. These are the torpedoes that go from 60 kilowatts. This is just a sample of the different railway subsystems. I like to say that a railway is a subway is a system, and there are thousands of subsystems like escalators, the platform doors. Here we have the PA system, emergency points, and so on and so forth. There's something that I haven't mentioned yet, and I don't have the slide here. In a GO4 can't survive without closing machines. There's no driver, so you can have an automated system without having a platform closing doors. The closing and opening is synchronized with the train and with the platform signaling. There must be a total connection with all the elements, because otherwise we can have failures. So here we have the different automated systems, the different levels of automation. GO1 is a classic operation. It only has ATP. ATP is the automated train protection. It only has that protection. Then GO2 is the one that usually works in the subways of cities that have been there for years. It has the ATO, the operation, and there's a driver. And then we have GO4, it's a driverless, and GO4 is the one that we have here in Lima, and it's a UTO. It's totally automated. And the most surprising thing of an automated system is that you don't have a driver, but the true automated system is in the brain of the operations, that it's in the control center, where they have the telecommand of energy, of circulation, and so on and so forth. Those telemans or telecommands command all the operations, including the unforeseen events. It doesn't mean that you don't have staff for the event of an incident, but everything is automated, and the train has a great advantage, and that is that it's a caterpillar train. You can walk from one end to the next of the branch, and you can see the tunnel that you are crossing. This was the arrival of the first car, of the first coach, in September 2016 to the port of Callao. This is we have different trains. We have 26 at this time, and the 36 of the 42 is being manufactured right now. We're going to have the trains before we're capable of working or operating them. It's a caterpillar train, and each side has an area for wheelchairs with a PA system, and there's an additional advantage, which is that in addition to having evacuation passerelles, the two sides are totally deployable. That is, there can be a ramp. A ramp is deployed for circulating. And if you want to do that, you can't have sleepers over ballast. Our rail is on slabs, which is very important and very positive for maintenance for any type of activity, because there's lots of activity in the night tunnels at night. When the subway stops working, there's lots of maintenance working in those tunnels. Here we have the 5 trains for the first stage. They're under a roof here in Santa Anita. They are being maintained over these provisional rails, and we have other 28 in Punta Negra. As I was saying, we are on our 36th car, and I think they will all be ready before we are capable of operating them. Well, the experience in the subway of Lima is very rewarding, it's very challenging, because it's very complicated to build an infrastructure of this type in a country that has never had something similar. For us, this is very normal because the first line was built over 100 years ago, but in a country that has never had an underground rail, and even less so if we talk about automated systems. Well, it's complicated, but we're doing it, and we're not gonna give up. What's important? Well, we have learned about the importance of risk management and the distribution of risk management in order to achieve the objectives. We also learned the importance of the contract manager, the document control, and traceability. You need a matrix, but a part of the matrix you need to understand it, assimilate it, and manage the risk. It's also very important, or at least as my experience working for the awarded company, we are working as an awarded company, but we have our EPC subcontractor. We had a turnkey agreement with this company, and this EPC has under its level it's contracted companies. Each level has a contract manager and document control. It's important to have a contract manager that knows the contract by heart and can set what the milestones are, what you have to pay lots of attention to, and then document control. You need a document control because there's a large amount of documents that need to be managed. And something very important in these countries is traceability. I had worked in Ecuador for 8 years, and I have noticed that there's a huge difference between my experience in Catalonia. Line 9 has... While we were doing line 9, we were doing 50 other things. What's the difference? Well, you sat down in the table with the subcontractor or the awarded company, depending on whether it was a public-private partnership or a public concession. But there was some reasoning there. There was a logic there. You agreed on something, and what you agreed on would work. And the difference is that in these countries, things are more complicated. Public officers are very afraid, not only because they are not familiar with the technology or the infrastructures, also because they are not fully empowered. They have their regulating authorities over them. If I were in the feet of that public service, I would feel the same. I would hesitate before making a decision. So I think when it comes to investors in these countries, I'm not only speaking of Peru, it's fundamental to have traceability. And I'm an engineer. For us engineers, sometimes we are lazy about writing, but we have to put things in writing. And be very careful about this, because if you sow, you can harvest. But if you didn't live any traceability, you're not going to harvest anything. It's important too. Another thing that we learned is the importance of teamwork and interdisciplinary works. We have people from many different countries working, and it's very interesting because some people know of something, some other things of some other things. There's still a lot to do in these countries, so we shouldn't look at it in a negative way. It's super interesting because countries that have 100 of years of experience in the subway, everything has been done. But if you want to live the experience of managing large infrastructures, and that's what I really like, you need to go to other countries. And finally, I want to say that working on an international level gave me a first row seat to be a witness of cultural diversity and having experiences with other societies that have different codes. We speak the same language, but we don't speak the same language. Sometimes you realize that you're not understanding each other. And I think far from being a problem, sometimes this can be very rewarding and can help us feel citizens of the world and not just focus on our little field of expertise. And stop looking at yourself. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to go ahead and pose them.
Bueno, pues muchas gracias, Carmen. Siéntate, por favor.
Have a seat. We are doing great in terms of the agenda. We're going to finish 5 minutes ahead. And for the first time in one of these symposiums, we are going to be in time for the conclusions. We won't have to run there. And we have time for a Q&A session and for debate.
Y además lo aviso, como dentro del programa de innovación, espero que hayan tomado apuntes.
I really hope that people in innovation have taken note, because I'm gonna do an exam. I have a question on security or safety when it comes to that totally automated system. How do you solve the issue of detecting people on the tracks? Do you use infrared sensors or what? Will all trains have sensors, volumetric sensors, etc.? And in subways, there a whole check of all the track is done, because sometimes there are works with lots of tools, and there are protocols, obviously internal protocols that need to be met. And then there's a supervisor of the supervisors, and finally a train. There's a train, an empty train that goes really slow from one end to the next of the line to make sure that everything is fine. The platform closing gates have the advantage that no one can access the tracks at night. I didn't elaborate on this too much because my time was limited, but platform closing gates are not only inherent to GOA 4, they avoid vandalism and trespassing, because when you are in operations, you see things like people doing metering, like people riding the trains on the outside. And then many people commit suicides. There's no publicity on that, but some people jump to the railways. And these gates avoid that, and these gates also avoid trespassing and things to be thrown on the tracks.
La mantenibilidad de la instalación ha sido considerada en el diseño.
Was the maintenance of the system considered in the design? Because we find many systems, underground systems, where whenever you have to do anything to intervene, you find like bombs that are impossible to dismantle or to take off. Yes, that needs to be borne in mind, especially when you're going to be in charge of the operations and you're going to be sanctioned for service levels. There's a whole organization for the operations and maintenance. We have operation jobs that are different. It's not only having a station chief. We have different roles. We have roles that are more versatile. For example, if the escalators, if someone actions the stop, you don't have to wait until the specialist comes. The people there has some minimum knowledge in order to solve minor failures while the specialist arrives. This happens on an organizational level. When it comes to trains, we're seeing how we can have a mixed agreement where the manufacturer is present on a large percentage. We're in Peru, all the plants, the manufacturing plants are in Italy, so we are seeing how we do this for the first and second maintenance levels. And then there's something that was very hard to do, but we were able to make it, is that when it comes to architecture, and especially if we bear in mind that we're in a very seismic country, the architecture, what we will see as users, should not be block walls with rocks hanging or attached to them, because if there's an earthquake, you have to be able to run inspections, and I don't know how you can run inspection if you need to break a stone wall and then there's a concrete wall. We are building a glass structure that has some steel panels that makes it easier to see or to check what the condition of the back slab is. It looks really nice to have those stone materials when the line is inaugurated, but then we have to think about maintenance, and I think that's what you were asking about. I can see that this is the best way to manage risks. I'm interested in something. I have worked twice in Brazil with tunnel boring machines, and often you see unforeseen situations like harder rock or water. Can you tell us or share with us any circumstances when the tunnel boring machine didn't work and how it happened and what you did? The tunnel boring machines haven't started working yet because the awarding institution hadn't finished preparing the land. We have had them since the first quarter in 2016. They're just lying there in Lima, but they haven't started working yet. Lima's terrain is pretty homogeneous, which is a great advantage. On the one hand, I have an area with water and an area without water. So there's a hyperbaric chamber in the tunnel boring machines that's going to work in the area with water. I have had 9 tunnel boring machines working when I worked with HISAT. You never know the rate of progress of the tunnel boring machine before you start working, because there's a learning curve, and I don't know how it will work in Lima. I have never bored. I had never done boring in Lima. It's a homogeneous land, which is good. Barcelona is awful because it can change in a matter of 20 meters, and that's awful for tunnel boring machines. In the area of Callao, we are under water level. We are under the phreatic level. That's why we have a machine that's working on hyperbaric level. It's a machine that has soil preservation and the capacity of compensating. The machines also have the possibility of injecting not only water but also slurry or foams to lubricate or to do boring. These machines are very well prepared, but there's always the possibility of unforeseen events. I would have a couple of questions, but I think we are going to meet the agenda and we need to move to the other room, to the auditorium, because that's where the symposium is going to be closed. So the conclusions of these presentations are going to be read, and I think the CEO is going to be with us, and he will close this meeting. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Carmen. I want to congratulate Carmen because she gave us a perfect idea of what's happening. I love how didactic she is because I'm really clear on everything.